Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to the Wombo Combo Podcast. We haven't gone anywhere. Only a couple of weeks we were off, but we are back, and we're ready to talk plenty of Dota 2 as the season officially kicks off, of course, later this week even, which obviously we're going to talk plenty about. But before all that, got to do the introduction. I'm BreakyCPK, joined as always by my co-host, BSJ. BSJ, welcome back and everything.
Thank you, sir. Can you hear me just fine?
I can hear you just fine. Yeah, you're coming through.
Okay, yeah. I'm currently in New York City, so just about to be home in a few days. Been gone for a while, so life's good, but except for I'm having some old people problems here. My neck's a little in pain for whatever reason. The theory is that I heard it when I was squeezing a lemon. So I'd like to just say it was more like I was manly, but it's not looking promising for me.
Were you making lemonade or something? What's the deal?
No, we were. What were we making for that specific one? I think it was like potato salad for the lemon. We made a picnic, so it's one of those where it shouldn't hurt, right? It's not like I'm too weak to squeeze a lemon. It's just like I randomly did. I'm like, ow, what? And then I went on roller coasters yesterday at Six Flags. Oh, and so I think like that made it worse too. So now like today I woke up, I'm like, wow, I'm old. So that's been my experience so far recently. All
right. Yeah, you keep telling yourself that you're old over there, BSJ. Totally.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
The lemon and the roller coaster combination, it always gets you, man. I could have told you that.
It's deadly.
But happy to have you back, obviously. So you're currently in New York. You were obviously at ESL just before that. So you're in New York because, go ahead and explain.
Hey, man, there's nothing to explain. I have a girlfriend. It's a momentous occasion, and she lives in New York. So on the way back from ESL, I was just like, well, she has a computer. I can stream from here. Let me tell you, I am a god on 20 ping.
Nice.
20 ping Dota is so easy. I like before that in Arizona, I'm working on like 75 ping. But I saw an opportunity to come visit her for a bit after the event. And that's what we're doing. It's nice because I'm able. We had our WESG qualifiers on Saturday.
That's why I thought you were there for. To be honest, I wasn't aware that there was more to it. Okay.
No. So what would have happened was I would have gotten back late Monday in Arizona if I had gone straight from ESL to home. But then I decided I'm like, well, it's basically the price of a one-way flight to New York that I'm saving or that I'm costing myself. And I knew that I would be also playing from here for the WSG qualifiers. And I actually was like, hey, maybe the 20 ping will actually help a lot. And I was pleasantly surprised. Let me tell you, 20 ping is day and night difference between 75. So I'll just leave it at that. But, here I am back in action. So
back in action, ready to go.
It's been a wild ride. This is the life of a Dota gamer, streamer, whatever, man. If you talk to Kyle, his is even more, all over the place than mine is.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, Kyle's definitely, he loves the travel life though. He's all for it, and he's all for visiting every place he can. So, but yeah, on that note, congratulations. By the way, you are officially in the finals for the North American region, representing NA's finest, as you're called, with Moo, Monkeys, Husky, and Oceania. So that's going to be fun.
Thank you. Appreciate it, sir. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. We have to beat the Fighting Pandas to make it to the tournament or make it to the LAN itself. So. We'll see how we do. We'll just have to hope we just never have to take his barracks, and then he doesn't hit his final form, and then we can win. So that's the plan.
Already got the strategy ready. Understandable. All right. So, best of luck there. Of course, that's still a little bit away, so we'll hype that up as it gets closer. Okay, about this show, though, enough about you and your stories here these last couple of weeks.
I'm not that interesting.
No, not at all. Not at all. The interesting news that certainly did happen. Well, before, we are going to be talking about the ESL recap, of course, something that you were attending yourself as a caster. We're going to just preview the Summit event coming up, but that was originally the plan, but then just a couple hours ago, I want to say, official news came out Team Secret announcing their changes that we all anticipated. At least something was going to be happening. The rumors floating around that, Mid One specifically, was he going to stay? Was he going to be removed? Well, we have official word. He is no longer part of the squad. They are parting ways. Mutual decision of sorts. I'll actually show it on screen for the people watching. But this announcement coming out earlier today. So he's no longer part of the team. And also Sunby, the coach, actually no longer part of the team as well. So only one player change in Mid One, but Sunby also no longer the coach. The new faces that have joined in place, Matumba Man, certainly one of the names that was on the list, and it is in the end Matumba Man. He's now joining Team Secret, and then Heen is now going to be coaching the squad for Team Secret on top of that. So it obviously a pretty massive change to one of the best teams in the world, no doubt. They were the number one team in the regular season last year. It's a pretty big deal when the best team of sorts makes such a change like this. And it's interesting. I see this, and it's like we knew it was coming, the talking was happening, but man, Mid One is such a good player. It is shocking almost in a sense to, on the level of a Sumail and EG in my mind, that no longer seeing part of the team.
Yeah, I think the one thing that makes sense to me about this whole switch is that when Secret played with a carry like Ace, they kind of needed that all-star skilled player, right, in Mid One. And now that they've got Nisha, he kind of fills that gap himself. And I think having more of like a consistent, kind of plays these cheese heroes type of player, I think fits probably better into their lineup. I think that's maybe their idea behind it. Maybe just Mid One didn't want to play anymore, or maybe they just were done with, maybe they didn't get along very well, something like that. I do think the Matumba Man, what he offers to a team does fit very well with the rest of Secret's roster. So obviously high expectations in general for Secret. I don't really think they're going to miss a beat with this sub. Kind of like Liquid did last season, didn't really miss a beat when they replaced just Matumba Man for Weehaw. I think these top tier teams, these captains like Kuroki and Puppy are very much aware of what it takes to be a top tier Dota team, and they're very aware of the current state of their own team. They're very self-aware of what's there, what's missing, what could be improved, what do they have too much of, that kind of stuff. And I think I trust Puppy and Kuroki more than anyone to make those types of switches. Yeah.
I mean, history speaks for itself right there. But more on the note of Matumba Man, going to him as the replacement. Okay, so obviously I'm not going to suggest, this is a bad move of any sorts. I actually agree with you that in the sense that he is much more of a dare I say a support core to Nisha. He can play a lot of different heroes. He's obviously played with one of the best out there in Miracle with his Liquid run, including TI7 victory and everything. So he's showing that he can do that. But when it comes to the name itself and his individual play, me personally, I don't have him as the highest of the high-tier core players. And we're talking about Team Secret here is obviously one of the best teams in the world. There's other names that were available out there. Now, of course, who knows what goes on behind the scenes, but such as a Sumail certainly comes to mind. So that's where I guess I don't know if I'm 100% sold on this being the absolute best decision for the team. But again, good player, a good fit in the sense of what he brings as a core player. He's not everything. He's not a very needy core player. But I just don't know if I'm sold on this being the ultimate move, the better move for Team Secret here.
Yeah, I just think he's the enabler. Nisha's going to be a type of player that's good enough to carry you every single game. You give him the perfect matchup. I think these two players can swap between mid and safe lane very well. So say you have a safe lane Lycan and you have this last pick Morphling or something that's going to win you the game and you want to put it on Nisha. I think they have that option. I think a lot of these other mids are kind of just known for being that flashy all-star mid. I think Matumba Man's mechanics are insanely good. I think I used to watch his stream a lot. His micro and such and positioning on the map is just really good. I agree with you that potentially there are better skilled mid laners, but I also think that that's an underrated portion of Matumba Man's game. So I think he may not be a traditionally flashy player, but I definitely know his mechanics and his knowledge of the game are top tier. And I have faith in him. I don't think he was just because Liquid got second at TI after kicking him, I don't think that proves that he was the problem or whatever.
Sure.
I think it's a classic scenario where, do I think Matumba Man's better than Mid One? Like, if you compare the two players, no. But do I think Mid One's better than Matumba Man? Not even necessarily. Like, that's what I'm trying to say is where it comes down to the better fit for the team. And when you compare Matumba Man to like the Sumails, these other free agents out there, I kind of go with the same mindset that it doesn't necessarily mean that they think he's a better player individually, but he fits the team's dynamic better.
Yeah. Then there's the other side of it with the coaching situation. It's one that coaching's a really interesting spot, and I know you can appreciate, even being a player behind the scene yourself, but it's one of those, as a spectator, it's hard to appreciate. It's hard to understand what they're really doing for a team, but, any good team will tell you, Bobo with EG and obviously Sunby with Secret, he with Liquid in the past, obviously former friend/teammate in a sense of Matumba Man, so perhaps has a reason for that move. But what would you say is the impact with this move, with Heen now coming to the team? Again, Sunby a great coach too, but is Heen an upgrade? Do you see that?
Yeah, that's tough, right? Because like you said, I know what a coach does, but it's hard to know what each individual coach is like. You don't hear too much from the coaches. What they offer is very much behind the scenes. You never know what, in terms of game plan, was their idea, what was a player's idea. I think both of these coaches are very solid. Like, their knowledge of Dota is amongst the best. But Heen obviously proving that any team he's kind of touched has proven to be that he has a positive impact on their results. Mm-hmm. I have probably Heen in my top couple coaches in all of Dota. I view him very highly. I would have to imagine that Sunby and Mid One were kind of a package deal when I say that. Like, I think they know each other very well.
Okay.
So I have to believe that they were more enticed to go with somebody else as a coach if they had a different option. If Mid One was leaving, I think it's almost a result of the Mid One being out of the team. And sometimes you just need to mix it up. The coach has a lot of burden. In football, like American football, the quarterback takes like all the blame and all the glory, right? Like when you win, it's like on the back of the quarterback. When you lose, it's usually their fault. That's kind of what the coach is in Dota. Like within the team dynamic, they're kind of like a mediator, sometimes even a counselor, sometimes a therapist. They have to do it all. And I think that even if people get along really well, sometimes over the course of just 2 years, you just need a fresh set of eyes and need to start from scratch with the coach. So I think that also will be a factor that came into play when having somebody get replaced.
Yeah, of course, Puppy, very, very experienced himself, but a change of pace certainly doesn't hurt, and we'll see what it looks like for Secret going forward. I guess the one last talking point on this was, we've already, in a sense, went over if it's right or not, this ultimate decision here. Again, Sumail, where the heck is he going to end up? That this is one of the options that it really seemed like that it was a very possible fit, especially with the rumors already going around that Mid One was no longer going to be a part of the team moving forward. But not the case. It is Matumba Man, deservingly so. You really got to wonder where Sumail is going to end up. At this point, rosters across the board seem pretty set, but that can change as we know. That can certainly change as we know. And it would be hard to believe that he isn't going to be on a roster as the season continues along. I don't see that being a situation, but he's a very young player still, and maybe that is the plan in the long run. He wants to wait for the right situation. And, of course, both on a contract standpoint and as well as playing as a team, that's certainly possible too. But not to make this about Sumail, but in a way it kind of is too. So, yeah, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just think I'm under the impression Sumail has some contract issues with EG. Like, there's things that are making it a little more complicated than most people believe. I don't know much about it, so I don't want to spread any rumors. Apart from that, I think Sumail. How do I word this? There's just so many things that can happen in terms of the teams, right? Like, all it takes is one major. A couple teams have less success than they want, and Sumail is obviously one of the hottest picks on the market. So I think he's just going to run. I think there's really no way to tell where he's going to land until we see the results of these tournaments.
Sure.
And like you said, I don't think he's in any rush. Really all that matters as a professional player is TI. So, he's got time. He's obviously still playing a lot. I see him in all types of pubs and stuff, so it's not like he's just dicking off and taking a break. He's definitely looking to play. He's kind of just in the wakes, I think, and that's going to continue until the right opportunity arises and things get sorted out on the legal end or whatever you want to call it with contracts and stuff.
Yeah, I've heard that here and there as well. It would be nice to get more official information, but I guess the more you think about it with the whole team at the beginning of the season with Quincy Crew and then all of a sudden not being a squad, at least him leaving it, but then subbing in for them at ESL, which that in itself was a pretty interesting, the fact that he even traveled with them. So I guess it is very believable that there is something going on there when it comes to contracts and behind the scenes. So, but yeah, team secrets, official new roster, Matama Man's in, mid one's out, also a coaching change with Heenan and Sunby out is the quick recap right there. Again, they're going to be taking place, or they're going to be playing, of course, coming up with a second cycle. We can safely assume, with that official new roster, so we'll get the chance to check them out. But we got a couple of tournaments in between. However, there was one event that did take place once again that you attended. So first, I figured it made sense to do a bit of a quick recap of that. That being ESL, where TNC ended up winning it in the end, 3-2 over Gambit in the grand finals. Pretty awesome grand finals, as I'm sure you could vouch for yourself. The fact that it goes 5 games, pretty cool. TNC, if we'll start with that, I mean, how did they look throughout the event, and what do you think about them?
Yeah, I think they looked really solid. Like, I was watching their entire group stage, their upper bracket run. Yeah, they had to take it 5 games in the finals, but they just looked so dominant, and they weren't like really good at one strategy. They were kind of just doing all kinds of things. I think I highlighted with their team was that they had 3 different cores who took over the game. It didn't matter what specific game it was. It just tied into what the draft enabled, what hero was the strongest in that specific game. KP, Armel, as well as Gabby have all proven that they can be like the one of the team, that just has the most influence on the outcome of the game. And yet, like, when I say that, I mean, there was one game where KP got a 1v1 as Venomancer in the side lane, and he spent the entire 10 to 20 minute mark just putting so much pressure on the opponent that his Morphling free farmed and carried the game. But in that case, I view KP as carrying the game. That's how when I say taking over the game. Yeah, the Morphling is their carry, just like a standard lineup would have, but the fact that KP start the way it was the key to their success in that strategy. And they were able to do that with multiple different lineups, multiple different players. And I think that that's something that is not easily achievable as a team, especially new. So I was quite impressed with their entire run in the event.
Yeah, this is a squad that certainly went through some changes going into the season, some bigger ones with Cuckoo specifically in AU, and of course even Heen no longer coaching after coaching a little bit at the beginning of the season, but with KP and March coming in. Certainly one to follow from the Southeast Asia region to see how these changes ultimately come together. They did qualify for the majors, so we know it looking good there, but it's a different pace when obviously you're playing against international competition than within your region. So this is that first glimpse of that, really, and they clearly came through. The fact that they were able to defeat Gambit in the end, a solid squad themselves. Now, I don't want to take away from this event, but I do want to go a direction. Again, this being ESL, it's not an official circuit event. It does seem like that these third-party tournaments are becoming a little less significant in their meaning. Obviously, there's still a prize pool, and there's still money's still good. But I don't know if I see this, and I'm sitting back saying, TNC is a team to beat Southeast Asia. They're going to look at going to the major. It's hard to just suggest that with this result. I mean, in fact, that frankly, Gambit, they're a solid squad, but to see them in the grand finals was a little bit surprising for myself as their opponents, and they had to go to 5 against them. So I don't know if you tend to agree or not, but for me, an event like ESL, it's great to have, but this is kind of more of like a practice for the DPC events at this point. I don't take too much from it.
It's absolutely practice, but I can tell you, it's a fascinating perspective to be an analyst at an event like that. I've had limited amount of experience with that. I'm forced to analyze and watch these games, right? When I say forced, I mean I have to know what every team's doing so that when I'm on the panel, I can talk about them. And so usually I'll kind of just pay attention to the better teams and that kind of thing. And what it took for TNC to be so consistently successful, I don't think is easy to achieve. And like they kind of just bulldozered over most of these like tier 2, tier 3 teams in a very like convincing way. That like I saw them always have the upper hand in the drafts. I saw them always feel like they were in control of the game. And none of that stuff's like coincidence, right? So that proved to me that they can like consistently perform as a unit, and that does tell me a lot. Yes, it is practice. Yes, these teams are not the absolute best teams, but they proved time and time again in these series that they were like a whole echelon above these other teams. And a lot of these teams are still figuring their stuff out, right? So the fact that they are, like you said, they have a couple new players, new coach, or they remove their old coach. It's like there's a lot that goes into that, and the fact that they're able to do everything they're already doing impressed me a lot, is what I'm trying to say. Yes, a lot of it just seems like the teams that didn't do very well kind of just didn't find their stride. Like I think Liquid, this kind of segues us into our next part of the notes. You talk about the disappointments. I think Liquid was a big one. For me, I think that this is something I don't like to say. I don't like to say this, but I'm just going to single out Boxy. I think he's the single issue on that team. I think that this patch is off laners like Legion, Abaddon, Omni, Underlord. We even saw at the tournament. It's these like sustained team fight builders. He plays Slardar, Axe, Centaur,
Tiny,
Timbersaw, Tiny. He plays heroes that want to get up in your face and gank. And that's just not what the offlane is right now. Yes, you can pick those heroes sometimes, but it's just not most of the time. And I watched their games, and every game that felt awkward in the laning stage, it was because they were like trying to enable Boxy. Like they were trying to give him a solo safe lane, or they were trying to give him last pick so that he could have one of these aggressive heroes to take over the game with. And because they were giving him last pick, they exposed the fact that they were tri-laning in the first 3 picks. Like they picked Grimstroke, Earth Spirit supports. It's like neither of those supports is a strong standalone lane support. So you almost can predict entirely that they're going to be together in the laning stage. And then they pick Sven. It's like, oh, that's such an obvious tri-lane. And it's like, you know what's coming. And their lineup was just so predictable. So for me, I think Liquid has some serious like self-reflection to do to figure out what to do about Boxy going into this major. And I think on this patch, they stand no chance. That is my genuine belief, that as long as this sustained heavy meta is a thing, they suck. And then they have to prove otherwise to me that that's not the case. I don't know what you think about that. I thought I was going to be the one honestly hating on Liquid, because I'm a fan of these guys, and anyone that has followed me knows this. I'm good friends with most of their players, and them coming from Han in the first place, and obviously this was a big move for them from Alliance to now Liquid, 2 very big organizations. Liquid arguably even bigger, but we're at a point now, the growing pain's got to be done. It really does. You have to be these big boys, and you got to be able to compete. And this goes back to my point that this being an event in ESL that isn't not a DPC event, the competition's solid, but there are a lot of teams missing that you're going to ultimately be seeing at the majors. Certainly, it's a mix of some major, mostly minor, even not minor teams. Man, getting eliminated in a group stage, a 6-team group stage, is brutal for a team like Team Liquid. And again, I don't want to oversell it, but it's interesting your analysis on that. I could certainly see that because, again, I know Boxy to be a very aggressive, in-your-face player. He's great at making plays, and on this patch, that doesn't seem to be the meta right now. So maybe that is just something they're going to have to accept and try to adapt on the fly going into the major. But they certainly do scare me going into such an event, especially a team that the biggest problem for me with them in the past has been they just don't know how to close out games either. Their laning phase always feels like it's solid for the most part, but then it just comes to the closing out the actual games. They fall through. They can't beat the better teams in the end, and they come up short. So, again, not to overanalyze Liquid here from this one event, but both you and I, and again, vouch for myself especially, definitely fans of this squad, and it was very disappointing to see them at the bottom. And the other team that I was going to bring up, making the point of which one was maybe
bigger surprise or the bigger disappointment was them and Fighting Pandas. The fact that Fighting Pandas also didn't qualify out of groups. But I think it's fair to say that both of our answer was going to be Liquid at that point, considering who they are in their past and what we expect out of them. Now, Fighting Pandas not getting out of the group, also a little bit surprising. But in the end, I don't know if I'm sitting here worried about a team like Fighting Pandas moving forward necessarily.
Yeah, I'll be honest, Liquid's draft looked bad, but Fighting Pandas just looked bad.
Okay.
So, I don't even want to, go much further than that. It was just their play. Everything looked chaotic. Things I kind of worried about at the start of the season. I didn't really know why they weren't surfacing. I kind of saw them surface at this event. So, I'm kind of back on the train that I was on at the start of this podcast, the first episode where we talked about, what we thought the teams this season were going to do. This event looked more like the Fighting Pandas that I expected when I initially thought about the team, and then they kind of proved me wrong in the NA qualifiers. So now it's like a best of three, right? They proved me wrong. Now I'm back on track, and now they've got the major to settle. Which way I'm going to go.
They got to win the major to prove you wrong. In the all they got to do is win the major. Now, it'll be interesting to see what they do. And again, the fact that they're in the major, pretty good for them. But that'll be a little bit of break before then. One bonus question being brought up in chat mod as well. Filipino Spaghetti, bringing it up. Clever name there. Do you guys consider TNC a tier 1 team after an event like this, or in general, are they a tier 1 team right now? It's, again, with the roster changes, I think that slows it down a little bit, but overall it's this whole tier system is kind of it's all imaginative anyways in a lot of ways, so it's for the sake of discussion. I would consider them a tier 1 team. It seems like they're certainly a squad that can compete against the best, and they have players on that, especially in KP, that have the experience necessary to compete. So I guess the simple answer from me would be yes, but how do you feel?
Yeah, they looked cohesive, and they got tier 1 players, so I put them on tier 1 for sure. I think that maybe they might be a step down from these other teams, but at the same time, I don't think it's a large step, and I would safely say I think they're tier 1.
All right, so there you go. There's a couple other notes from the event, not to go too deep into it, but again, the Quincy Crew situation, as we mentioned earlier, CCNC actually got sick of some sorts and wasn't able to play. Sumail, who ended up traveling with the team anyways, was able to play in place for him. They did get knocked out in the group stages, though, so it didn't affect moving forward in the end. But, so overall, a solid event, fun to watch, especially with BSJ there, of course. I made a point to tune in.
Yeah.
Well, only to watch your analysis, the great analysis that is. All right. The next event coming up, though, the big one, the one that really matters for the DPC season, we got Summit just around the corner. It is officially beginning. In fact, when is it beginning? November 7th. So that is, what is it, the 4th? So, yeah, on Thursday. Officially begins Thursday.
Wow.
Of this week. Yeah, it is coming up quickly. It finally made it to the first official event of the season. And again, this is going to be unique in the sense we've had many summits before, but with so much more on the line now this time around, and even having a live audience and everything, it'll be extra entertaining. But summit event, you got 8 teams going in. Ultimately, the team that wins it, of course, qualifies as the last team to the major. There is that $300,000 prize pool as well they're playing for, and some DPC points. Well, let's be honest, in the minor, you're not really getting a significant chunk necessarily. But one note going into the event we'll start with is Virtus Pro, a team that qualified for the event. And again, it was surprising to see them not qualify for the major in the first place. But then it's like, okay, well, at least they qualify for the minor. They announced that they actually are pulling out of the tournament. And a little bit shocking because, again, this is the DPC official event. This isn't, some third-party tournament. It's an official event, points on the line and everything. They announced that they were pulling out of the event. There was a little bit of drama on it as well that I wanted to touch on too. And Roman, who is actually, I believe, the owner of VP, or very high up in the general manager of VP, made a point at Beyond the Summit in terms of them announcing a little earlier than they would have liked and making a point that the reason they withdraw was due to some visa issues, and they had a little bit of banter back and forth, but ultimately came down to BTS somewhat apologizing, and then eventually VP released an official statement that suggested it was a mix of visa issues, funny enough, but as well as just wear and tear on the team and still trying to figure things out, essentially, going forward. So they did make a point that they were going to play in ESL, which they did, which, again, they got knocked out in the, I want to say, in the second round of the playoffs, so they got a little bit further there. But it comes back to a team pulling out of an official DPC event. Again, if it's purely visa situation, I completely understand, but this didn't feel like it was that. And even with the whole explanation, it felt like it was more of a, we just don't feel we're ready, rather than an actual visa situation. So I don't, and if that's the case, it feels a little bleh to me. It's almost the best way to put it that I can put it, I guess. But, they're obviously, they can do that, and they are not participating. But all right, there you go. That's what happened. What do you think about this whole situation?
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. That's just a very strange situation. It's always unfortunate. You just the whole looking at it from the outside in is just, you never know. There could be so much. It could be, the players being like, well, we don't feel ready and we just played ESL. Let's take a break like all the other teams did. It could be visas. There's so much theory crafting with this kind of thing, and I choose to just say, they aren't there, and just to handle the tournament accordingly. They already signed Save, right? I believe they did that. They officially signed him to the team, so they seemed pretty happy overall with their results at ESL. So maybe they didn't have the perfect results, but I saw over the course of that event that the team was coming together pretty well.
Okay.
I thought towards the end of the event, they looked way better than they did at the start. I don't think they looked where they need to be yet, but they did look better. At the start, they looked pretty shaky. They looked incohesive. And towards the end, it looked like they were kind of finding their stride, their identity. And they were clearly willing to pick drafts that were outside of their players' comfort zones in order to push them, in order kind of treating it like, scrims with money. And I think that they have the right approach going forward. I just don't have too much to say about why they're on the minor. That's just weird to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I look forward to seeing this team going forward. They definitely look like they have what it takes to improve. They know what it takes to improve. They're doing things properly. It just matters how long it takes, and if that's too long before they change their roster.
Yeah, I guess ultimately for me, it's a case of, it just feels a little bit too much of, we're used to qualifying for the major. We didn't. We don't want to bother with the minor. There's so few DPC points anyway, so we're just gonna, make up an excuse, go to ESL and not worry about it. And that's I guess what kind of bothers me the most. And again, we don't know 100% if that's even the case. This is speculation. But being buddies with BTS as well, and knowing how big of an opportunity this is for them to have a big name like Virtus Pro pull out of your tournament after qualifying is certainly a hit for them too. So that's, I guess, the other side that kind of hits me the wrong way. But it's happening. VP no longer participating. In their place, they're replaced by, I'm calling them 178, just to make it easy. A lot of random letters in before that, but it's the roster of Palantimos, Pikachu, Kazil, Bignum, and Happy Durura. It's a newer player. I never heard of him before, actually. But, of course, representing the CIS region, they were actually the third-place team in the qualifiers. Hellraisers, of course, also qualifying as the second-place team. Will be representing CIS as well. So that's how they ultimately went with it. Just 178 replacing. Just to be clear, also, the full lineup, you got Ninjas in Pajamas and Adphenum representing Europe. You have Invictus Gaming out of China, Geek Fam out of Southeast Asia, Quincy Crew from North America, of course, and then Pain Gaming out of South America. So those are the 8 teams competing for that prize pool. And again, ultimately the first place team going to the major on top of that. So pretty big deal. I wanted to start with this event first. The format being official, the idea that they're doing a double elimination. It's actually going to be a GSL format, which is the mini bracket, or however you want to look at it. It's the 4-man teams in each. 2 teams only coming out. So you have to take care of business in your group, or you're not even advancing on to the next stage of the event. I've never been a fan of this format in a significant tournament such as a minor, and I definitely consider it significant. But I'm sure schedule constraints, etc., is part of it. Not a fan, but that is going to be what the case is. 2 teams getting eliminated, so half the teams getting eliminated after the groups, and then you have a double elimination playoff stage. is what we're looking at. So, are you as annoyed by the format? Or you don't really care as much?
I'm not a huge fan, but I also think you're given two chances here. Like, yeah, you have a best of three. If you lose it, you get another chance. If you lose that, you're out. You have to win 2 out of 3. You have to win 2 out of 3 best of threes to make it to the playoffs. And I think that overall, this format may not be the most consistent, but if you are a good enough team, you're going to win it. So, like, if you're clearly better than the teams in your group stage, like, what I think this format does is maybe it allows for one fluke or like kind of team that wouldn't be imagined to go through the group stage to make it. But I think the best teams of the tournament are going to show themselves in this type of format anyways, and they will be able to triumph despite the fact that it's not as much leeway for mistakes.
All right. Yeah. Again, I couldn't confirm. I don't know if this is... Because obviously with Valve getting a little more involved with the whole DPC, I don't know if this is an official format for the minors that we should expect. Or actually, okay, I guess I just answered my my own question. So it is. It is the official format, it looks like, that they chose to go
That's
with.
what they're required to do by Valve?
It is what they're required to do. And see, even that, I guess, yeah, so touching back on that, man, really? That's what they went with? I'm actually surprised. I thought this was going to be more of like them scheduling issue, but I guess Valve's fine with the idea that this is a valid format, despite it being pretty significant. I mean, you're right. You ultimately have to win 2 best of 3s to not get knocked out, but I just hate when it is a very significant tournament that you don't even literally get to have a chance of seeing half of the teams. Because that's the case here.
I think that's kind of how people view the minor, though, right? Tier 2 Dota's never had too much respect, I'd say, like not only from maybe Valve, but also from the viewers. I don't think that if I'm like hosting, if I'm hosting the summit here and I broadcast that I'm having 178 versus Pain Gaming, who's going to watch that? Like, in terms of, no offense to these teams, right? Like, I'm just trying to be brutally honest, right? Like, I was watching ESL, for instance, and when you had Alliance versus VP, there's like 35,000, 40,000 people watching. When you have Fighting Pandas versus, I'm trying, like,
Viking.
God, it's amazing. Viking, yeah. When Fighting Pandas versus Viking, you're getting like 12,000. Yeah. So I think from a standpoint of the tournament organizers, they don't really mind this. Like, I think there's enough notable teams in the minor that's not some joke of a tournament, right? It's obviously going, like, the winner goes to major. But I would say that this is the proving grounds for these bottom 4 teams. Like, there's really no, in Dota at least, this has always been the attitude. Do I say it's the right attitude? That's not what I'm saying, but it always has been, where it's like, nobody cares about you, right? Like, make me prove to me that I should care about you.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if I've never heard of 178, I'm straight up never watching them in the group stage. But what if they just, well, obviously if I'm an analyst at the event, I'll watch it. But if they make it to the playoffs, I'm like, oh, suddenly, you've caught my attention. I'm going to watch you and see, like, maybe why you got to the playoffs. So it's not something I think everyone wants to hear. I've never really spoken my opinion on this, but just to be blunt, if you're like a tier 3 team in this minor, nobody gives a shit that you're in the tournament. Like, that's just how it is. That's the sad reality. But the one thing I like about this kind of format, the one thing I will like about it, is that it doesn't take much for a team like that to immediately gain traction, right? Yeah. Like we saw with Demon Slayers at Dream League. Nobody's even heard of these guys. Like, this is a new squad. Suddenly they're in like the final 3 finals, and everyone's like, wow, that's so hype. It's like, that's something that's quite quickly and quite possibly done by these lesser known teams in a format like this. And it kind of gives that NCAA basketball tournament vibe where, some 10 seed can squeak into the final 4 and suddenly they're on everyone's radar. And in this case, it's even cooler because if they somehow manage to pull it out, where they win the whole thing, then they're finally at the major. There's a lot they can roll with this. So I think the attitude that most viewers have, as well as teams should have, is this doesn't mean anything unless we win it. Like, this is what this means, unless we win it. So let's have, like, people are going to view it accordingly, and people are really only watching you in order to see what you do moving forward going into the major. So not trying to be too harsh,
it's good.
I think it's a sad reality that a lot of viewers don't want to admit. They say support the tier 2 Dota scene, but they're not going to watch. They're just not going to watch these games. So as much as they would the others, right? It's drastic. It's 300%, 400% viewership for the big teams over the tier 2s.
Yeah. So. And we're all guilty of it. I mean, that's a whole nother topic, whole nother debate. The idea of these tier 3 scenes, and I mean, you look at traditional sports, all these lesser leagues like G League for NBA or just the minors for baseball and everything. I mean, the attendance and the eyes on that are of course going to be less overall. There's other things done in place to then draw the attention ideally, but it is more about fostering a player base for the eventual, for those opportunities to then come to the big stage and really prove yourself. So I actually really like the comparison you made to the bracket for NCAA. That's a fair point. The idea it's just that much more epic to be that dark horse. And you could argue that this format is actually better for an underdog team because there is only so few chances that if they just happen to be the better team in that one best of 3, then all of a sudden they're possibly going to the playoffs, and we'll see what kind of run they can make. We've seen them.
That's when tier 2 Dota gets interesting, when 178 eliminates NIP. That's when it gets interesting, right? Wait, what? That's when things that's what gets these games viewers. People want the drama. They're oh, this is the team that knocked out PPD, in Universe. That's the fun stuff. So I think that despite everything, this is probably the most exciting format for a minor. Okay. I think at the major it wouldn't fly, obviously. That's just not going to happen. But at the minor, I think it's exciting.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, so again, it starts on Thursday. Unfortunately, we don't have the groups yet. I was hoping maybe there would be a chance of that, but no groups to discuss further there, so I'm sure that'll come out in the next day or so. By the time you hear this podcast, very likely could be out, but as we're recording it, not out as of now. So it's going to be 4 teams in each, though. 2 from each group advance on into then that double elimination format. But I figured the fun way to get a little more talking points out of this event would be making more of this quote-unquote game show segment, and we're gonna just do a simple fill in the blank, make it easy here. We'll start with the first one. The team that will surprise people the most at this event is blank. Who do you feel is going to surprise people the most?
I'll argue for Geek Fam based on what I've seen from the other 2 SCA teams that went to the major. I thought they were going to go to the major originally. I think they're going to crush this tournament. That's kind of my initial view. I think they're just better than everyone else as of now, and that has to be proven to me. So I think most people don't think that, though. So that's why I think that the team that will surprise the people the most is Geek Fam.
All right. I'm going to go with Ad Phenom. I think the Greek hype is back and is real. And, I'm not going to sit here and say they're winning it all, but I certainly think that they are going to be reminiscent back in their days of back to even the Boston major that took place, going all the way to the finals and having quite a run. I just, maybe that's the half Greek in me that's rooting for them and the hopeful side, but we'll see. But, I think Ad Phenom certainly has a chance to surprise people. Again, we all know this team from the past, but it's been a long time. They've kind of gone their own directions, gone their own ways for a while, but they came back together for the most part. And I'm excited to see not only this event, but how they do throughout the season. So definitely one to look out for as far as the surprise of the event. All right, so the next one, the team I'm most excited to watch perform. It's kind of, I guess I can go with that as well. But I'm going to personally go with Quincy Crew. It's because it is so unknown. It really is with the squad right now, especially coming off that ESL performance. Now, again, with the whole CCNC situation and being sick, hopefully he is good to go now, of course. But, really get to see what Saberlight is going to bring to the table as a true offlaner. You are back to his position 1. We know this team has all the potential in the world to even win this minor, but will they have it come together? That's what I'm most intrigued by, and a bias sure as well, but they're definitely a team to watch for that reason.
Yeah, I'm most excited. I'll have to go the other side to NIP. I think they looked terrible in ESL. I think they looked terrible in the qualifiers. This for me, I'm excited to watch them because I'm ready for them to dud and change roster, or I'm ready for them to somehow have pulled it all together, right? Because I think the roster itself is good enough. but the results have been atrocious. So that is who I'm looking the most excited to watch, because I'm a big fan of Gunner, I'm a big fan of Universe, big fan of PPD. Obviously, I don't know too much about the other two other than what I've seen so far. I've been rather unimpressed with Skeeter, and I want to see it all come together, man. I think their drafting at ESL was scared. Like, I think they were drafting so scared. And I want a team like VP, I thought, despite the fact that they had new players, looked like they were drafting confidently, even if it didn't work. I'm telling you right now, I watched Ninjas in Pajamas drafts at ESL, and I watched the game and I said I'd put my mortgage on them winning or them losing this game. Like, their draft has no chance to win this game. Like, I'm telling you, like, I watched it and I was like, what are they doing? I couldn't believe it. I was like, dude, Gunner, man. I talked to him after, like, what's the deal, man? And I'm not going to tell any more than the fact that he's like, we figured it out. He told me a couple things about what was going wrong, like nothing, too insider. But he's like, we figured it out. And I'm like, okay, man. So I want that statement to be followed up, and I look forward to seeing what they've done to address this. So,
all right.
That's where I'm going for.
All right. Well, a player to look out for at this event is Blank. So you kind of gave some insight there on maybe a one, but is there a player that really for you that you're going to be excited to see how they perform?
I quite frankly, this may be a weird answer, but it's going to be Ryoya for me because him and I have had our random tussles back and forth in the NA scene. It's kind of like neither of us hates the other, but he doesn't really like me. I don't really like him. I've been like, he doesn't think I'm any good. I've always questioned whether or not he's like a legit competitive player, because he's kind of been in that tier 2 scene for a while. I think he's got a real shot with this team being legit. And I basically want to go into this tournament and watch like some consistent performances from him and have him just like take over these games, because I think that their team is on their own tier compared to most of these teams, and I think that he as a player has the potential to do that. And I'm kind of rooting for him, but I'm also kind of rooting against him. He's like a very polarized, like whether or not he's going to be the carry of the game or kind of just feed away a lead. And I really want to see that he can do like that. This new team allows him to be that carry that he can consistently be. So that's what I'm looking for.
All right. Mine is, I touched on it a little bit earlier, but specifically Saberlight, going back to Quincy Crew and his offlane play for the team. And again, the idea that you're replacing a legend in Sumail. Now, you are a true offlane player, and that's the biggest difference, and that's why they brought him in to perform in such a role. So I'm intrigued to see how he does, of course, again, coming off of that ESL event as well. But we'll see how he's able to perform at the Summit now with the squad. Again, back to full 5, good to go, and in their homeland of sorts, I guess you could say as well, with being representing NA, of course. And Quincy Crew. So for me, it would have to be Saberlight amongst a couple others that come to mind. But, I was going to go a direction. This might be a little far-fetched, but also Gunner, back to NIP. And I say that because the more I'm thinking about it, so now with Sumail still being out there, isn't NIP a team we got to start thinking about as a possibility too? As far as
I don't know if him and PPD get along. I really don't. I'm not sure.
All right.
I'd be curious to know as well. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yes, it's things can change over time, but that's fair. They have had their differences in the past, certainly, after their success with EG, of course. So, all right, moving on to the final question, though. That's a pretty straightforward one. The team that will win the Summit Minor and go to the Major is blank. Who do we think that team is going to be?
I said Geek Fan, but they're going to get second. They're going to lose in the finals because all my answers about Ryo are going to come true, and IG's going to take it, man. I got IG winning this tournament. I think the Chinese qualifiers look by far the hardest, and IG, I'd say going in based off of who won the based on the qualifier strength of teams, they would be the strongest.
Okay, so the IG squad there. Yeah, it definitely was. I was even looking back at their China qualifier. It certainly was a run. They had to go 5 games against CDEC in the end to advance on. China is always a very difficult region. They do seem hit or miss at times, though, especially at these minors. I'm actually going to go back to Geek Fam. I really like this roster and their potential. We hyped them up as a possibility of even going to the major in the first place. That didn't happen, of course, but they did do good enough to qualify for the minor and looked pretty dominant throughout that. And looking back there, 3-1 in the grand finals, a couple of 2-0s before that. And this is a squad that certainly speaks of potential, especially with a team like NIP coming off quite the laps at ESL. Quincy Crew, the same story there. We got recent evidence of their play and maybe still trying to find their groove. So I think Geek Fam is going to be a little quicker on that, and I'm excited to see them take this minor and go to the major. So we'll see if that comes through. But, of course, again, at the minor, really a lot can happen. And, you look at this list of teams, it is an interesting list as far as how it's come together. And that always is the case, I guess, with a new season in general, especially with all the roster changes and how things look. But it'll certainly be a fun event. And, again, that kicks off on Thursday. So by the time next week's show rolls around, we'll be able to go over, the results there. So we'll see how right or wrong we were when it came to the said talking points. Anything else on the event that you want to touch on before we move on?
I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I thoroughly enjoyed watching ESL, so I'm going to be probably doing some similar stuff from home, where I'm going to be watching the tournament, the summit in that light, where I'm kind of keeping track of every team's progress over the course of it. And I look forward to seeing who ends up coming on top, because I really think this is a free-for-all going into it.
Yeah. And again, that first place is absolutely what matters. The fact that then you get to go to China, go to the major, and compete there for that $1 million prize pool and everything else, especially the DPC points. Pretty big deal. So going to be fun. Starts on Thursday, and I'm already excited to talk about the recap on the following show. But that's getting down to the end, though. We were able to kind of go over and catch up a little bit as far as a couple of missed shows these last couple of weeks, but obviously understandable with BSJ being busy. One other, I might as well bring it up, though, before we do officially wrap up, is the announcement from ESL and Dota buff was a very interesting one. This whole Reach initiative, however you want to suggest it, it's essentially a Tier 2/Tier 3 and amateur scene matchmaking initiative. They're hosting prize pool where they get players to queue at the same time on any given night, and then at the end of the week or whatever, they then take the rankings via win-loss record, and they give out the prize pool accordingly. So, there's complaints about the matchmaking, and Valve's done their part to try to help it out, but third parties getting involved to do their part to help it out is an interesting idea. It's kind of an in-house, being a player yourself, that I don't know if you've actually had the chance to participate in it or not, but what was your take on this announcement, and how do you see it working?
I mean, I think in-house leagues in the past have just been not hard enough. Like, what I mean by hard enough is there's players in the in-house that nobody wants to play with. Yeah. Why are these players allowed in the in-house? They naturally implode the in-house. Like, if you play 20% of your games with a player that you just absolutely dread and nobody wants on his team, eventually you're going to lose players. And then that player is going to be on your team 30% of the time, and then 40%. Then you just don't want to play anymore. I think that this is a nice step. I think the major issue in Dota right now is one of the major issues is that anyone who's not on a Tier 1, Tier 2 team really has no reason or no validity to saying, I want to go Dota full time. It pretty much says nobody who's hasn't already made it can really make it unless they just put everything on the line, or they're 19 years old living with their parents and they don't have any living expenses. This actually gives, playing with teams. I've had players that they're not able to commit to Dota. They're not willing to commit to Dota because they have to have a full-time job on top of Dota. And I would like to think that something like this, it's enough money to live off of if you're consistently placing decently. So I think when I say live off of, it's a start, right? You can start and you can finally start committing to Dota with this kind of boost to your income. So I think this is really important. It sounds like they're pretty serious about this being heavily regulated, where if anybody's doing questionable things or being just a terrible thing for the league, that they just get booted. And I think that that's really important. there can be no leeway on this. Like, you cannot play favorites. That's kind of what was done in the other ones. You can't play favorites. You can't just say, hey, this guy's really good. Like, this is Arteezy. He's allowed to do whatever he wants. Like, I'm not saying Arteezy's like, badly behaved or whatever. I'm just saying that no special treatment, no mercy. Like, make this look professional. Because as of right now, like, I can tell you, even with my qualifiers for WESG, like, trying to throw together a team of reliable players that are going to show up to the qualifiers, it's tough, man. Like, people ditch last minute. I've talked to random other people. Like, people just ditch. Like, people are unreliable. It's not treated professionally, and there's like no reason for it to be. Like, I'm not saying it's like these players' fault necessarily. It's like, give some incentive to treat Dota like it's an actual job, because that's what other sports do. You have minors, baseball, stuff like that. Like, you just, I think it's something that we need.
Yeah, again, that's a discussion for another time as a whole, but it's certainly keeping the amateur scene happy and a chance for them to develop in a reasonable manner while they can still, make a somewhat of a living is understandable to ask for to keep the ecosystem going for a healthy Dota 2 competitive scene as we move along. So it is a cool initiative. I will say I casted the first night of it just out of curiosity. I joined like 6 or 7 games actually throughout the night, and most of them seemed pretty solid. There were a couple. You did have your trash talking popping out. I'm like, all right, that's gonna happen, I guess.
Trash talking can happen. That's okay.
Yeah. No, it's I didn't see anything over intentional like feeding by any means, but there certainly were some words being thrown around. So, but as you said, I mean, trash talking to an extent is certainly okay there. But yeah, it'll be fun to see how that plays out. And again, just the beginning of hopefully much more of it and much more development. Okay, I think that's good, though. I think we once again have covered what we would have liked for what's officially our 5th episode. So again, it's apologize for missing a couple of weeks right there, but we're not going anywhere. We're definitely here. This is the beginning of the season, and excited to keep it going throughout and having some fun with it here for the Wombo Combo podcast. So as always, before we do BSJ, anything else before we wrap up?
Nah, man. See you next week.
Sounds good. We're going to be recapping Summit. Certainly a fun event ahead of us there, so hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. Once again, I was BreakyCPK, as always, joined by BSJ. The Wombo Combo podcast officially coming to a conclusion here. Hopefully you enjoyed. Tune in all over the place as far as the spectrum goes for the podcast, from Spotify to iTunes and everything, and to look forward to seeing you guys next week, ideally every Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern is when we record it live on our Twitch channel. Have a good night, guys. We'll see you next time.